Welcome to another installment of Peace Garage. Today we'll be looking at the positive battery cable on my daughter's 2003 Honda Accord EX 4-cylinder. This seems to be causing an electrical problem in the car where the instrument cluster will go dark, and eventually the car had a power failure which left her stranded on the interstate. So today I'm going to share with you the process that I used to replace this cable in her car. The cable we're going to replace starts up next to the fuse box, runs to the positive terminal on the battery, then takes a little run behind the intake manifold and ends at the alternator. The first thing to do is get the appropriate parts. This will require the VIN number of your car when you call the Honda dealer. Studying the new cable before you start taking the old one off will give you an idea of how many different connections you have to make under the hood when you replace the old cable with the new. Before you get started, you need to gather up some tools for this process, and what's pictured here is what I've used to replace the battery cable in my daughter's car. Some interesting tools to point out are these ratchet end wrenches, which are great for getting nuts off the top of the starter behind the intake manifold. The magnetic pickup, definitely for fishing out parts you drop inside the engine compartment. Wire cutters, because some of the connectors will have to be cut loose. And rubber gloves. Basically I use a vinyl liner with a nitrile glove on top. So round them up before you start.
The first thing we need to do is get the battery out of the car. To do that, we have to get the cables off and also take the hold down strap off the battery. Make sure you look down beside the battery and see where the metal rods that come down from the strap attach, because you'll have to remember that when you put the battery back in. Okay, the next thing we need to do once we have the battery out is do some cleaning. There may be some acid on the battery or in the engine compartment itself. Next, we'll go back into the engine compartment and pull out the base where the battery sits after unhooking the positive battery cable. Note there are two knobs on the bottom of the base.
In this step, we're going to disconnect the battery cable from the fuse box. You can do that by opening the fuse box. Just squeeze the clips on the side and it will pop open. And then there will be two connectors from the battery cable into the fuse box. And note that the white connector goes on the left and the black connector on the right. There's also another connector under the fuse box as part of the battery cable that you'll have to disconnect as well.
Note the battery cable and connectors on the fuse box.
At this step, we'll disconnect the battery cable from the alternator, which is the other end of the battery cable. There is a nut that holds the power cable to the alternator, and there's one other connector on the side as well. Working back from the battery, it's time to unhook the big mid connector and the power cable. Here you see what the old connector looks like and what the new connector looks like. You'll slip this on a metal plate that protrudes from underneath the intake manifold. There are three connectors behind the intake manifold. One of them drives the starter, and there are two other connectors as well. You'll have to basically push your arm in between the alternator and intake manifold and use the box end wrenches to unhook the nut on top of the starter.
Once you have all the connectors removed from the old cable, what you want to do is start on the battery side of the car and pull the cable out. Pay special attention to how the cable wraps behind the intake manifold, because you'll want to thread the new cable back in that direction as well.
This was about a 2 to 2.5 hour process, just because I had not replaced a battery cable in a Honda before. If you take your time and work through the old cable, making sure that you note any interesting things that may cause you trouble when installing the new cable, you should be able to do this fairly easily and save yourself, from what I've found, about $300 or $400 at the dealer.
All right, let's see if this thing will start. I want to point out one of the issues I ran into while working on this car. The connector identified by the red arrow sits up under the fuse box and happens to be attached to a plastic piece underneath the fuse box. When I tried to pull this connector out, the plastic essentially disintegrated. So be careful with these connectors. This is the only one on this car that was attached to plastic, and I think you'll be successful with this project. Well, this wraps up another episode for Peace Garage. I look forward to posting again in the future as I continue to work on our children's cars and other projects. Thanks. Bye.